Recently, I received an email from a viewer that I would like to share with you. Hello, my beautiful motorheads. Welcome to Furus, where we inspire you to live fiercely. I'm your host, Annick Magac. I love getting emails and direct messages from you guys because you really let me know what you like and don't like. Well, what's been happening has been that now that the show has been going for a little bit, you guys are starting to give me recommendations for people to interview. So let me read you this letter. And it goes, Hi, Annick. I've been enjoying your YouTube interviews, especially with Chris Cosentino and Walt Siegel, who I have been following for years. I would suggest giving Brian Schaffran a call and consideration for an interview. He and his fabulous wife, Molly, run a public access motorcycle garage in Cleveland, Ohio. In addition, they operate a very successful program to bring shop class back to local high schools. The students actually disassemble and put back together CB350s to running condition. Cheers, Stan Lippert, Ohio. Stan, thank you. You think you know everybody, and then you find out the motorcycle community, there's still a lot of people to meet, and there's still a lot of motorcycle experiences to be had. I got in touch with Brian Schaffran. He agreed to be on the show. And today we talk about what it takes to run a community garage. We talk about bringing shop class back to high schools, which I think is like one of the best things I've heard in a really long time. And we also talk about the experience of failure and how that can be a really great learning experience, but also a real growth experience, both for the kids and for adults. Brian, what would make you want to start a community garage?
The idea came from when I was driving a Volkswagen bus in California and couldn't afford to pay a mechanic. And so the necessity of needing to work on it, but not having a way to, made me think, well, wouldn't it be cool if there was a place I could pull it in, put it on the lift, change my oil, do what I got to do. And I was young and broke and had no money to start such a thing. So I sat on the idea. And then when I got into motorcycling, I think I bought my first bike in 2001 or two, and there was an old CB750, and I couldn't get anybody to work on it. It seemed like I was right back in that spot of, for one reason or another, either not being able to afford someone to work on my old stuff, or no one will work on it, not even the dealership it was purchased from, and I didn't understand why. I understand now, but then I was like, well, my community garage idea would probably be better for motorcycles than it would be for cars. So it kind of came back to me, and I just figured it had to work. I couldn't be the only one that was suffering through, trying to figure out a vintage motorcycle. So it was necessity.
It seems like you're into some vintage things. And I think I might want to note that in 2001, it was a lot harder to get information on a lot of these vintage vehicles because it was just kind of like the beginning of the internet.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. You're totally right. And in 94, 95, when my bus really started breaking down a lot, I don't even know that I'd been on the internet yet.
Probably not. I'm only saying that from experience because I also started with a vintage motorcycle and it was a poor decision. I remember like having to find a catalog and then try to call a guy up and know the part and then wait for him to go look for it in his stock room, get back on the phone, and then I would send him a check and then he'd send me the part.
Oh my God. I forgot about sending checks.
I know.
Man, totally right.
So when you had this concept for Skidmark Garage, and to you though, like what would entail community garage, and like two, where would you even start it?
Well, the original idea was for cars, and in my mind, it was 15 bays long, each one having a lift and each one having its own set of tools. And then like one person that kind of knew his way around all vehicles and could guide each person and make sure they were doing things correctly. And people would just come in and do simple things for a couple hours, and car would come down and they'd bail. And then when the motorcycle idea struck me, I knew it had to be in like an old falling apart warehouse and give it that like urban decay feeling. And there's no shortage of that in Cleveland. And I thought I knew how it was going to work, and I really didn't. And I just kind of went with it and figured it out over time. I think there were plenty of ideas in the beginning I had that quickly went by the wayside, and ideas I hadn't thought of that I had to incorporate into running it so that it would be successful.
So what's something that didn't work out?
It was actually a good thing it didn't work out. I thought that because everyone I talked to, including my family, thought it was the dumbest idea ever. No one had ever heard of such a thing. In fact, the only people that understood what this was are people in the military, because they have the hobby shop on bases where they get to, for like $1, fix their car, and they can rent all the tools. And so I didn't know that. And in my mind, I'm the only person on the planet that came up with this idea. So when I was describing it to people, they all couldn't grasp it. And their biggest question was, well, how are you going to protect your tools? Everyone's going to steal your stuff. You're going to have all these bays of tools and people are going to walk off with it. And there's no way you're going to be able to stop that. So I spent a million hours trying to decide how to keep this perfect inventory. And was I going to take a picture of the tool bench when they came in and then a picture when they left, and look at the picture and compare what's not there? Was I going to have them sign things in and out? Was I going to keep it all behind a cage and they'd have to give me their ID and ask for things? And I found out pretty quickly that nobody has ever in 10 years taken anything out of here. And I don't have to worry about keeping an eye on things. Even when I had a huge party here on Saturday and there was 500 strangers in here, nobody took anything. Nobody touched anything. And I remember asking a member after about a year, telling him that this is what my family thought was going to happen. He was like, well, that's stupid. Why would anyone steal from what they have free access to? Like, we already feel like this is our garage. Why would we steal from our garage? So that was something that blew my mind. I also never really considered how difficult it would be to collect the money from the people. And I've been really bad about that. I haven't signed anyone up on recurring credit card payments, no automatic charges. So it has been a constant battle trying to connect and get people to pay. And they're not being malicious about it. They're just, they don't get a bill, they don't pay. Like, if I joined a gym and they didn't send me a bill, I wouldn't pay either.
Right. Well, would you consider switching over?
I've asked. I had a meeting with all the members, and I'm like, hey, I want to do this automatic billing, and you give me your card number, and it automatically takes it out every month. And out of like 50 people, 40 of them said, no way. Tons of people still pay cash in here. There are a couple people that still pay with checks. Weird.
It's a topic today.
Right. So,
or theme.
And I also couldn't understand in the beginning why I needed to get an accountant. I was like, why do I need to pay someone to tell me that I have no money? I see my bank account. I see that I'm coming down to like $100 at the end of every month. I don't need to pay someone to tell me this. And so I didn't get an accountant for the first probably 7 years I was in business. And I see that that was a huge mistake. And I still can't explain why, but I can feel it in my bones now that I'd be better off if I did have one from the beginning.
I think those are some good words of wisdom, because when you start a small, you started, but you get a great idea. You start a small business. There was no blueprint for what you were doing, Yeah. It's not surprising that there's been a learning curve.
And I try to tell all the other community garages that are trying to start up, and they contact me and ask me for, hey, can I ask you some questions? I already know what they're going to ask. I've answered these questions 50 times over the past 10 years. So I basically have this huge email bullet point of, let me send you answers to the questions you aren't even understanding that you need to ask. So I usually send that off and then have a phone call with them and, just own up to all my mistakes. Like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this.
I think that's pretty awesome. Most people don't like to admit what they've learned the hard way. So that's pretty cool that you're actually sharing that. And I want to circle back a little bit to, you had mentioned that people haven't stolen anything, and that really makes my heart all warm and fuzzy, because I always say that the motorcycle community is amazing and, people will help each other out, but to actually hear that is fantastic. For me, I've known that in working or sharing garages, more what has happened in my experience, so I'm curious if this has happened to you, is just things being broken because people don't understand how to use the tool.
That is a gigantic issue in here. I've always been saying, from the beginning, I thought that everyone would want to join the garage because they have access to the expensive tools that if you're only going to use it once, you don't want to go buy you don't want to go buy a sandblast cabinet. You're going to use it for 2 hours and never touch it again. So I thought if I had all these cool tools, all these people would join because of these tools. And I thought, well, the other plus is when it breaks, they don't have to fix it themselves. They don't have to buy a new one. That's on the garage to do. But it's not like things are breaking just from wear and tear. They're breaking because they don't spend 2 minutes on YouTube watching a demo of how to use it. They just, and you know, the number one thing are chain breakers. And chain breakers are not cheap. You get the nice ones and they just take them and they just go crazy. And next thing you know, everything's broken. And I'm like, dude, that was $100 and now I got to buy another one. And so many tools get broken because they just don't know how to use them. And generally, men are too effing stubborn to research how to use these tools.
Or ask.
Yeah.
or ask somebody who's like, you look like you know how to use it, but I don't want to admit that I don't know how to use it.
Yeah. God, they just won't admit it. It kills me.
I've seen it a lot.
Man.
Well, do you guys ever do classes?
There
Or
is
tutorials
one.
or like, do you have that guy that's floating around?
We
Like
we
that you
have a
wanted?
guy. Yeah. There's a couple guys here that know how to use everything, but the other, 99% of the members won't admit they don't know how to use something. But there is a guy named Steve Noble who's a member, and he has his own little LLC called Noble Moto, and he makes tons of videos for like Fix My Hog and Lowbrow Customs, and then he runs little classes out of here. How do carburetors work? How does electricity work? How to do maintenance 101 type things on your bike. And he's been trying to run a here's how to use all the specialty tools class. And he's never gotten anyone to ever sign up for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Guess this goes back to what we were just talking about.
Yes. The stubborn male.
I know.
God.
Come on,
So-
guys. If it was all women, we'd be like, oh, we got notes. Can we?
Yeah.
How'd you do that? Can you repeat it again?
Right. God. And
Hate to say that, but that is a fundamental difference.
yeah, a huge difference. And
Yeah.
I've experienced that huge difference in many, many ways. But I thought about putting like a QR code on the plastic case of every single specialty tool so that they could scan it and then see the quick demo of how to use it without anyone knowing that you're watching a how-to video. But
I think you should totally do it.
I haven't gotten around, but I would love to do that.
It's a good project.
Yeah, because I need more of those.
Maybe not for you, but maybe for a intern.
An intern. Yeah, that's a great idea.
I got a few of them. Stick with me, kid. So with Skidmark, also, do people just come in per project, or can they keep their bikes there? And like if they have like a long-term project, can they just keep the bike there and work on it and show up whenever they want, or do they have to like move in, move out per job?
I offer both, and I would say 95% of the members are leaving their bikes here and doing long-term projects. So the membership includes leaving your bike. So if you buy a 1-month membership, you can leave it here for 30 days and then you get 24/7 access. So you get a code to the lockbox in the back door. You can come whenever you want, open up the door, turn on the lights, do what you got to do. But there is also an hourly membership for the people that just need to do a tire change or an oil change. That's not as common as I thought it would have been. I'm not entirely sure why, but I would say in a year, if I have 30 new members join, only 3 of them are coming in for an hourly thing and then taking off. So it's almost all leaving their bike here. And then once they find the joy of working with their hands, and I mean, for some of us, it becomes an addiction working with our hands and helping other people. So the guys that come in, I keep saying guys, when the people that keep coming in and they're working with their hands and they find how much satisfaction they get from working with their hands and helping the person next to them, even when they don't really know everything, and they'll be the first to tell you, I don't know how to do this, but the opportunity to help people is a tremendous sense of gratification that we don't always get anymore. Children get it, children love to be helpers. And that base feeling of helping is something that children live for. And then it's kind of pounded out of us at some point. And in here, you get this great combination of community and helping and working with your hands. And so eventually, within a first couple, if someone buys a 6-month membership. After 1 month, they've gone and bought a second bike or a third, and they're storing them here, and they're just lining bikes up for future projects. And as soon as they finish one, they start on the other, or they finish one and they go buy another really quick because they just want to have a reason to come back to the garage. That's pretty common. So we have a lot of people that are here for years.
That's great. You had also said, just as we were getting on, that you had a big anniversary this past weekend for the shop.
Yeah. I opened in January of 2015, so we celebrated our 10-year anniversary Saturday, and had a couple bands play, and a bunch of beer, and tons of bikes, and everyone just hanging out, having a good time, and walking around and checking out the garage. It was really fun.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
That's one of the things I miss about being in an urban area, because there's just like, it's easier to congregate, but having a cool point like Skidmark is like, makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, it was great.
What's the Cleveland scene like for motorcycles?
Huge.
It
doesn't make any sense because obviously we don't get to ride all year long.
Yeah.
I would say having 8 months of riding is very lucky. It's probably more like 6 or 7. And so you would think there wouldn't be anybody riding here if they can't ride all year long. And you would think that everyone in the South rides every day, all year long. But the scene up here is absolutely enormous. And there's a Harley dealership up here that I think is either number 1 or number 2 in the country for selling brand new. And you know how much a Harley costs.
Yeah, very expensive.
They're pounding out several a day.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. The second the temperature gets to be above like 45 and dry, you start seeing them on the road. And there's a huge amount of vintage bikes up here. For some reason, Honda had a pretty big presence in the like 60s and 70s around Cleveland, but definitely in Ohio. And there's just billions of these ancient Hondas all over the place. So the scene is huge. Cleveland Moto is selling all kinds of wacky stuff all the time. They're Gucci dealership, Enfield dealership. They're always representing these cool different brands. And we've got a Triumph dealer, Ducati dealer, got a Honda dealer. Sills Honda has been around since I think the 60s. So there's a huge population of riders in Cleveland.
How many motorcycles do you own?
I think I've gotten it down to 2 or 3. There were at one point like 8 or 9, but I'm trying to embrace the idea of being a minimalist a little bit more. And so there have been several people that have come into the garage and say, "Hey, I love what you do. But I don't have a bike, but I'd love to have a bike just so I can work on a bike." And I'll say, "All right." And I'll just kind of shove off one of my personal bikes. I'm like, "You can have this for $500 if you buy a year membership," which is a huge deal. It's a bike that I could probably go and sell for $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000. And I just want someone to love it. And I want another member of the garage. So I was able to get rid of 5 or 6 bikes that way. And I just kept my 75 Gucci and my 67 Honda 305. Other than that, I don't need anything else.
That's impressive. So you're still loving the vintage motorcycles?
Yeah. Only.
Yeah. So besides Skidmark, you also have another program. And when that got brought to my attention, I was really intrigued by it. So I'd love to talk about MotoGo Cleveland.
So MotoGo is essentially we are bringing shop class back to school because in Ohio, and I think a lot of the country, shop class got removed because, well, for several reasons. And I don't know if we want to go into those reasons, but it's gone. Yeah,
Let's go into it.
So it disappeared because of like state testing. So when the state said, "We're going to dole out all the money to all the schools like we always do, but you're only going to get all of the money you deserve if you show us that all the kids are passing all these tests. And we're going to test you in math, English, science, social studies." And the schools that were struggling, namely the urban schools, they're like, "Well, we need all the money from the state like we've always gotten, and our kids aren't passing these tests, so we're going to lose all our money. So we are going to eliminate shop class and music and gym and art, and we're going to double down on these 4 subjects so that our kids can spend more time doing these things, and then they could pass the test." So that was kind of the final straw that broke the camel's back. Before that, the cost of insurance was making it hard to have shop class. The stigma that was attached to taking shop class was like, I think the first big negative associated with shop class. Everyone's being pushed to college all throughout the 80s. The stigma of everyone that takes shop class is a stoner and a flunky, the insurance, and then the tests, and now it's gone. So I was a high school teacher, and I experienced how little knowledge students had with using hammers and cordless drills and rulers and screwdrivers. And I was disgusted. And I thought someday I'm going to bring this back, because it was really important to me. I didn't take shop class. My dad wouldn't let me. I was being pushed into college like every other kid in the 80s. And even though my dad was super handy, the stigma was what stopped him. He was like, you're not going to be a laborer. And I bought into it, hook, line, and sinker. But once I was in California and I had to fix my own Volkswagen, that's when the whole thing like woke me up. And I realized how awesome it was to learn with my hands. And so I went back to school to finish being a teacher. And I just had to get in front of kids and stop them from just memorizing things and let them understand that you can learn with your hands. And it's this life-changing experience. And after I opened Skidmark, I was open for a couple of years. And then I was like, yeah, I'm, certainly not busy enough. Let me start a nonprofit with my wife, and we will bring these motorcycles to schools, and we will show the kids how to use tools by throwing them in front of an old motorcycle. And we had a couple people that were members of the garage that believed wholeheartedly from the minute I talked about it. And they kind of pushed me and they pushed my wife, Molly, to form a nonprofit and get this going, because they believed in it as strongly as we did. And so we had several meetings with an advisory board and said, here's our idea. And they directed us in a much more efficient way, of a better way to do things. And so now at this moment, we're in, I think, 12 schools, and we bring old Honda CB350s to the schools, or we bring just the engines to the schools, and we leave them there for the whole semester or the whole year or the quarter or several years. And then the students come out to whatever room they've got these motorcycles in, and it's usually once a week, twice a week, for an hour at a time. And we just throw them to the wolves. And we don't show them how to use the tools, and we don't explain much about the motorcycle, and we certainly don't explain how to read the climber manual. And so we set them up for failure. As crazy as that sounds, our whole job is setting them up for failure and letting them suffer through the failure, because they're terrified of failure. They all are. And once they realize that they can fail a billion times and it's not the end of the world, they're not going to get an F. At the end of all these failures, they're going to have a running motorcycle. And it just redefines the importance of failure in a way that they've never been exposed to. The best way to learn is by screwing something up a million times and having to fix that broken thing that you just screwed up. And the manual is not written for 17-year-old girls in a private school. It is written for a seasoned mechanic male who's, already understands what these parts are called and knows that these black and white pictures that kind of suck, knows what to look for. And so most students these days don't have the experience of reading a manual either. And so we get this perfect storm of shit that these students don't understand what they're doing. But by the end of it, they're calling the tools by name. They're calling the parts by name. They're completely problem solving in ways they've never done before. And it is all about problem solving. And some students come out of there like, this is the greatest. I want to be a mechanical engineer. I want to go to college. I didn't know I wanted to go to college. Some students come out of there like, I'm glad I took it, because I thought I wanted to work with my hands, and I realize I do not. I'm like, that's just as important, to know what you don't like and what you're not good at. Either way, every single kid comes out with a significant jump in confidence to know that they have the ability to fix something and solve these problems that aren't just on paper. So it's this mission, and we've got this great team of people that all believe exactly as Molly and I do. There's 5 of us that go to these schools, and so we're going from school to school to school every day. All 5 of us are in the morning at one school, late morning at another school, early afternoon at another school, late afternoon at another school, and then the day is over, and the next day, different schools. And then on Saturdays, we get the Cuyahoga County juvenile, the kids that are in the court system. and they have to do community service hours, and they come up to MotoGo and they're helping us rebuild and prep bikes and engines for when we bring them to schools. And they're doing the same thing that the kids are at the fancy schools, but we just bill it as you're helping us prep these things. And really, we're just doing the same thing. We're exposing these kids to working with their hands. And I would say for a huge percentage of these students, it's life-changing, whether they're at a public school, private school, or in the county program. They all walk out with smiles. They walk out like saying, oh my God, I could probably do this. I could probably do this for a living. I never knew that I could use these tools. I can't believe that you're just trusting us to use these things. So it's the greatest. And every single one of us, there's 7. We're hiring another 1 or 2 here pretty soon, because I think in the fall we're going to be at 20 schools. And it's every single day, every single class. All of us at MotoGo are like thrilled about what we're doing.
What's the age range of the kids?
The earliest we do is 6th grade, and then
So
we
how
go
old
up
are they
to
these
18.
days? In 6th grade.
6th graders are 12,
Okay.
11 and 12. The 6th graders are okay. It's the 7th and 8th graders that are pretty tough. 6th graders still have a sense of fear of consequences for misbehaving, whereas 7th and 8th graders, I think their brain has been spun around or something, because they just can't grasp consequences for being a knucklehead. So that's a bit more of a challenge. In my mind, I'm really good with the high school kids. Some people, thank God, are better with middle school kids, and so we're trying to put people where they're best fit.
When you decided to become a teacher, was it in a subject, or did you immediately just go into teaching this?
When I decided to become a teacher, the only thing that I felt like I could, originally I wanted to be a math teacher because I struggled so much in high school in math. And I thought, if I can be a math teacher, I can help out the kids that are struggling better than a couple math teachers that I had. But then after I flunked out of Ohio University, I went back to school to be a history teacher, because all of a sudden I found this love of history. But I soon realized that it didn't really matter what subject. And I taught at a Catholic school for 5 years. And the first year I taught world history. And then the second year I taught computers. And then the third year I taught geometry. And then the fourth year I taught trig. And the fifth year I had to do computers again. So I realized that it didn't matter what subject I was in. I could still reach the kids, and I could still kind of get the message across of the importance of learning and using your hands. Although I hadn't totally discovered the using your hands bit yet, I was on that way. I was on the way to explaining the importance of things and letting kids fail, although I didn't really know that was my curriculum, my hidden curriculum. But all I knew was I had to stop kids from just memorizing, because I feel like I didn't learn anything in high school. A couple subjects here and there, I learned some things, but I feel like I got through high school by memorizing for a test and then taking the test and then forgetting that stuff the next day. And I thought that was learning. I truly believed that was how you learned. And once I worked on the Volkswagen and it changed me, that's when I was like, I got to get back to school. I got to stop all these kids from wasting high school, and I have to get them to understand they just can't memorize. So I didn't really care what subject, but history seemed to be the easiest in for me.
It's impressive that you made that a drive, because I think that if more kids had been exposed to shop class like you're talking about, like it was waning during when I went to school, and I had it up until 8th grade, and then after high school we didn't have it. And I think it would change a lot of people's futures and their trajectory. Like, as you were talking about exposing people to different things, but also realizing that a lot of people have an innate ability to work with their hands, and the satisfaction and the confidence that comes from that can be really life-changing, because if you're never exposed to it, you don't even know that that's a part of your personality or your aptitude. When you were, you talk about working on the Volkswagen, and, you also had the vintage motorcycles. How did you learn in particular to do mechanical things?
Trial and error. I was pretty scared of breaking things and failing. I still don't particularly like failing. And even though I preach it to my students, I'm poor when I fail. I get very, very upset. I was terrified to play around with this Volkswagen. I had no experience working on anything mechanical, but I had a roommate in LA that was so casual about it. He was like, listen, we've got tools in the garage. Uh, I've got a hydraulic jack, and if we take it apart, we can put it together. And I just bought into, like, I borrowed his confidence. I was like, okay, if you think we can, then I'm in. And I bought the idiot's guide, the Volkswagen for the Complete Idiot that was written in the 60s, and it had all these hippie drawings and stuff. And it's written like a novel instead of a manual. And that walked me through taking the engine out and taking the engine apart and then buying another engine and putting all the parts back on. And there was things that we couldn't get to work. And my roommate was like, oh, let's just call a machine shop and have them make these things. And I was like, what? You can't make these. These have to be made in a factory. He goes, no, there's these guys down the street. There's machine shops everywhere. Let's just bring it to him and he'll understand and he'll make them. And sure enough, dude made me all these new bolts with different size heads that were the only things I can get to work. And so it started up like first try. And then I drove it around the country again. And I didn't know that's how I needed to learn. I didn't know that I had to do the trial and error. Everyone talks about it. Oh, it's learning the hard way. Yeah, I guess you could call it learning the hard way. But I feel like that's more people than not. And the hard way is the good way. There was a kid that at Oberlin College, we had our first MotoGo class at a college over the winter. And, it's Oberlin. It's this very prestigious, it's like the first college in the country to accept women. And it's got this long history, and it's so academic, and it's liberal arts and fancy and expensive and awesome. And we got all these kids to sign up, and they had no experience at all, most of them. They just wanted to do something different. They were totally game. And after it was done, one of the kids said, you know what I really liked? I liked that when I failed at something like 4 or 5 times, and then I got it right on the last try, he's like, now I understood why the right way is the right way, because I got to see the wrong way. I got to see like 5 wrong ways of doing it, and then I got to see the right way. So now it makes so much more sense why the right way is the right way. I'm like, man, you get it more than anybody. And that's kind of how I have to learn. And I think that speaks to a lot of people, and they don't know it yet, just like I didn't know it.
Are you guys doing this program full time? Like, is that what you do full time? Okay.
It is. Yeah. So I do the MotoGo gig from like 8 in the morning until some classes go as late as like 5. And then I come down into Skidmark and spend several hours here in the evening.
So you work a lot.
Yeah. I love it.
Do the parents get it?
I think all of them do. We don't get a ton of interaction with the parents because we're not employees of these schools. So we're not in on like the parent teacher conferences. So the only time we get to get feedback from the parents is if a school has an open house and they're trying to attract new students in, and they ask us to show up because we're like a feature, one of their classes, and there's all these families walking through. There's usually a family walking through that says, oh, my daughter took your class at this school a couple years ago, and it was her favorite thing in the world. And we saw how it changed her, and we love it. And if you guys are here, we're going to send our kid here. And so I think all the parents get it, which is fantastic.
That is great. Thank goodness.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you see this going, this program?
Well, it's going to sound preposterous, but
I love big ideas. Bring it. Let's go.
Being a teacher for as long as I was, I saw all the good and the bad of the education system. And I think that the bureaucracy of education and the politics of education has made it very, very difficult for students to get what they need. And I think that MotoGo is the holy grail to education. And I feel guilty, might be too strong of a word, but I feel guilty that I haven't gotten this at every single school in Cleveland. And therefore, I feel like I need to get it in every single school in the country. And I feel like this will change education for good, or for as long as, and the end goal is to get shop class back. The end goal would be the nonprofit no longer needs to exist because every single school has shop class and every single school is talking about the importance of failing. The grand plan that Molly and I keep talking about is getting Cleveland to saturate the schools with it. And we've got a killer team, but we kind of need to be 3 times the size. And as soon as Cleveland is cruising, we've already been to several cities to speak about expanding, and we've gotten great reception every time. But I think now the next step after we get Cleveland going is to just get in the Volkswagen, because we bought another one, and we drive to some city and we live in some city for 6 months and we get that one rolling, and then we go to another city and we get another chapter rolling, and we get to travel and we get to go camping in the bus and we get to save education. And if that takes the next 20 years, great.
Is there a way that people can support you and donate?
Yeah, we do have a pretty big fundraiser in the early spring every year. And the MotoGoCleveland.com website has, I think, some donate now buttons. So there's monetary donations that can be made, which is the most helpful. We've had people donate CB350s, which is really helpful. We get local companies like, I think Sherwin-Williams came in and donated like 30 people's time to help paint things and organize things and clean things. And Lubrizol Corporation, they send us volunteers to help with whatever we need help with. But the donation of straight up cold hard cash through the website is the absolute best way to help. It goes directly into buying more motorcycles and getting us into more schools, because a lot of schools can't afford it, and it's not a cheap program to run. And so the schools that can't afford it, we give them a ginormous discount, and we have to eat a lot of that cost. So the donations we get from the fundraiser and from the website help cover that.
Well, I will for sure put links in the description so that people can donate and talk to you if they've got motorcycles that they'd also like to put into the program. And that also makes me think, like, would you also take tools, like if they were in good shape or anything like that? Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That
one doesn't happen as often, but it would be great.
Okay. Because they can get very costly and some stuff is harder to find. But when family members pass away, somebody might have a Bridgeport sitting in their garage. So you never know.
Yeah.
I was really trying to think before I came on here. Like, I'm not even being able to put like my words together eloquently to just say that I think it's so important to have shop class, and it would have made a huge difference in my life. But anybody that I talk to in my friend circle who builds things, I know a lot of builders, and most of the people I know also wrench on their own motorcycles or are just like fanatic gearheads of some sort. And I kept saying, I'm going to have this guy on who is trying to revive shop class. And every time I said it to somebody, they'd put down their tool and they'd be like, it's about time. Like,
yeah.
And I was like, I know, right? Like, how do you, like, everybody talks about changing the education and stuff, but I just think that there's this void that needs to be filled. There's also a void in people's lives that needs to be filled with something of substance that they can have and see physically that there's been a change and they've helped make that change. So thank you so much for what you guys are doing. I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And also, even with Skidmark as well, because so many people never learn as adults even to learn how to work on their bikes or, even where to start. And it can be very overwhelming. So community garages seem like where it's at these days. Not that there's many.
Yeah.
I don't know many. I know of you and my friend in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm sure
Which one?
Moto Girl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's the first.
Yeah, I had her on a previous episode, which I'll link.
Oh, that's awesome.
Valerie's fantastic.
She's I believe she's the oldest functioning community garage in the country.
Really?
She's been around, I think, 12 or 15 years.
Yeah, I think maybe I have to look back at the episode. It might even be a little bit more than that. It's totally impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a legend.
And it's like, and in bringing up again, like you have a party this week, and it's like, this also brings up like people want to get back together and do things. And a lot of people who ride want to find other people to ride with or just be among people who have a shared interest. So it's really cool that you're also doing the Skidmark.
Yeah, right on. Thanks.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us that we perhaps didn't get to cover?
No, I think you asked all the perfect questions.
Sometimes I pass through Ohio, so if I come knock on your door, is that okay?
Yeah, that would rule. Would love it.
All right, cool. I would love to meet you, Molly, and get a tour of the shop. And
That would
maybe
be
even sit
wonderful.
in on one of the shop classes, because that might
Yeah.
actually be really fun.
Absolutely. Oh, the one thing that I got to say is the girls are a billion times better at building motorcycles than any of the boys. And it's even when I was a regular high school teacher, I knew that there was differences, but now that I'm at schools that are all girls schools and I'm at schools that are all boys and mixed, the all girls schools, oh my God, it has completely made me understand and believe that women should be running every single aspect of the world. They're better at listening, trying, understanding, asking questions, doing, the agility, the caring. It's so disheartening that this world has kept more than half of the population under their thumbs. We all suffer because the lack of women running things, and it makes me so angry. And I tell these girls in these schools, I'm like, you guys, I'm going to do everything I can to make you understand that you have to run everything. And it is unreal.
Wow, you might be like the best spokesman for. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all. I mean, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, of course you do. Of course you do. And you can say it a million times and men aren't going to listen.
No.
But if every garage was full of women and every construction crew was all women, cars would be fixed right the first time. The roads would be perfect all the time. Everything would be great. It's
so funny because I've been trying to tell people this forever.
Yes, of course.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow, that's awesome. I feel like that's kind of like a mic drop. We might have to end on that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
All the women mechanics.
Thanks
in
for
the world.
having me.
Thank you. And I'm sure your community is very appreciative. So again, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. And to everybody else, ride smart. Ciao.